Like many people who grew up through the 1990s, I was a huge fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. Those first 4 main series entries, as well as a few spin-offs, played a definitive role in my nascent love of video games. Like Switzerland, I didn't take a side in the console wars, being both a Sega and Nintendo kid. I had plenty of fun with my SNES, but there was something about the sleek black Mega Drive and its no-nonsense lightning-quick mascot that was just the coolest thing ever. As time went on and gaming technology progressed, however, the fortunes of the world's fastest hedgehog began to change. The 3D revolution arrived, and while Mario took to it like a cheap to water, Sonic struggled in these multi-dimensional environments, his trademark speed at odds with this newfound freedom of movement. I consider his first proper 3D outings, Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, among my favourite games ever, but even they had undeniable flaws. For me, that only got worse with the gimmicky Sonic heroes and the miserable Shadow the Hedgehog, and, fortunately, my interest in the series died just in time to avoid being disappointed again by the notorious Sonic 06. The following 2 decades saw the blue blur fall further and further from grace. I didn't play much of this output other than the odd demo here and there, but I kept up to date with news and reviews. Too fast to just become roadkill, Sonic was continuously forced into modestly and negatively received jank fests, and pale comparisons of his more successful contemporaries. It's telling that some of his most acclaimed games since then have been Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania, games which were practically greatest hits compilations of his old school titles, the latter not even being made by Sonic Team, but by passionate fans desperate for a return to the glory days. I did actually play these, but I even struggled with Mania, my love for even the classics diminishing in my adult years. To me, Sonic was pretty much dead. Which made it all the more strange that my interest was piqued by the first trailer for Sonic Frontiers, which appeared to be Sonic dipping a toe into the open world genre. A new direction was unsurprising, given Sonic Team's penchant for trying to constantly cram the Hedgehog into new frameworks without giving the series any real room to grow. Getting excited about a new Sonic installment was dangerous ground though. Even as an outsider, I know that fans have continuously been raised up by a glimpse of a new revolutionary Sonic title, only to be brought crashing down when it inevitably becomes another slice of misery featuring his most annoying friends. As interesting as this one looked, I was sceptical that A, Sonic Team could ever produce a good Sonic game again, and B, his super fast, high-octane gameplay would transpose into the inherently mysterious and slowly unfolding nature of an open world. Several years ago, gaming journalist Keith Stewart described how the original Sonic the Hedgehog felt like incorrect game design. It doesn't really allow for careful consideration of your next move in the way that every other platformer did. It fires you off at 100 miles an hour, often sending Sonic off the screen, and half the time you need to cross your fingers that you'll make it out unscathed. Yet somehow it's exhilarating, somehow it works. And I'm as surprised as I am happy to say that Sonic Frontiers feels much the same. I won't be spoiling any of the story in this video, just showing gameplay clips. The game opens with Dr. Eggman up to his usual tricks on a dark night and fiddling with some ancient technology when he's suddenly sucked into another dimension. We then see Sonic and pals flying over the ocean towards the Starfall Islands in search of the Chaos Emeralds, when they hit a bit of turbulence. Before they've got time to fasten their seatbelts and make sure their tray tables are in the upright position, they're pulled into the same kind of wormhole. After a quick, inexplicable run through the bastard child of Green Hill Zone and Windmill Isle, you, as Sonic, are left to your own devices in a brave new world, which the game isn't shy about letting you know, like a child tugging at your shirt to show you the drawing that they're proud of. Early on, Sonic even remarks how a waterfall reminds him of Sonic Adventure's Mystic Ruins, as though willing you to reflect on how far the series has come. Screenshots from previous games are even later used as flashbacks, going as far back as Sonic 3. In that regard, if the original Sonic the Hedgehog was influenced by a pinball table, Sonic Frontiers feels like it was influenced by an amusement park. It's a weirdly compelling mess of an open world game, or open zone game to be specific, made up of 5 non-connected but expansive islands. The place feels a bit cluttered. There are multiple set pieces crammed into open plains which feel jarring at first, but dashing around ticking off each of these little challenges soon becomes addictive. There's a rewarding degree of difficulty that requires some quick reflexes, but it's super satisfying to pull off a series of moves to traverse the island and scale the heights. It's difficult but fair. Screwing up usually feels like it was your fault, and it leads to a sense of just one more go. Progression is mainly regulated by interlocking collectibles. Gears from defeated enemies unlock cyberspace sublevels, and keys from cyberspace sublevels unlock emeralds, and emeralds are used to take on the bosses of each island, and defeating the boss of an island unlocks the next island. Character-specific items in each world move the story along by unlocking cutscenes between Sonic and his trapped friends. The group mercifully kept to the classic gang of Tails, Knuckles and Amy. I enjoyed these interactions for the most part, in particular the ones with Knuckles. The Echidna talks about how he feels isolated as the last of his kind, but Sonic reassures him that while he might be the last, he's not alone as long as he has the others.
It reminds me I'm the last Echidna, that I'm alone.
You may be the last, but you're not alone. You've got us, Knucklehead.
It's a very sweet dynamic that I don't think we've often seen between these two rival characters who tend to deal in arguments and insults. Even Eggman's story is more heartfelt than I remember ever hearing from him. His latest creation is an AI named Sage that takes the form of a young girl, with whom he develops more of a relationship than any of his previous minions or allies. Her frequent interactions with Sonic are reminiscent of Amy and Gamma's dynamic in Sonic Adventure. The artificial being that's unable to understand the hero's love and friendship, but after observing them over time learns compassion in spite of its programming. I actually laughed at this piece of meta-humour between the two.
What is your end goal?
It varies. Sometimes it's a spinning sign, sometimes it's a big old ring.
No, I mean, what do you want to accomplish?
Comparisons to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild might sound obvious, but it's a perfectly appropriate metric against which to measure open world games, especially Sonic Frontiers. It's obvious that this revolutionary Zelda entry is what Sonic Team were channeling here, evident from the first area, Kronos Island. The lush vegetation dotted with ruins and dilapidated machinery brings to mind the most recent iteration of Hyrule. These springs, rails and platforms do blight the landscape sometimes, but they also recall the industrialisation versus nature imagery that set the tone of the series since the very first Sonic. It's an aesthetic that I love, present in everything from Miyazaki to Mother. Amy even comments on this post-apocalyptic setting, how the island is beautiful but has a sad atmosphere and how the land is struggling to regrow. The towering enemies are reminiscent of Breath of the Wild's divine beasts or the eponymous enemies in Shadow of the Colossus, particularly in the way you mount and attack the biomechanical monsters. It was a pleasant surprise to suddenly see the distant first Titan from a high vantage point, a sense of discovery that recalled suddenly spotting a divine beast from atop a Sheikah tower. Starfall Islands also live up to their name by having meteor showers regularly. They act in the same way as Breath of the Wild's blood moons by resetting enemies, but are far less terrifying. Picking up the fragments powers a slot machine that can earn you purple coins, used to take part in a minigame which we'll get onto later. Its placement on screen is kind of irritating and to my knowledge can't be disabled, but it only lasts for a few minutes each time. The native Cocos are a thinly veiled allusion to Breath of the Wild's Koroks, similar in both looks and how collecting them rewards Sonic with upgrades from an elder version of the creatures. They even jingle and chirp in a similar fashion. The entrances to the cyberspace levels feel like Breath of the Wild's shrine mini-dungeons, particularly akin to the Sheikah architecture of stone interspersed with a neon glow. The flying monsters, including the squid on Kronos Island, gracefully twist through the air in a way not a million miles away from Hyrule's majestic dragons, while the shark enemy recalls both sand seals and moldugas. The plaintive piano music and puzzle completion chimes further conjure the same idea of a delicate natural world ravaged by outside forces. On the subject of puzzles, they can barely be called that early on. Several literally require holding left for a few seconds, another required hitting 5 targets with the homing attack, which I assumed would have to be done in a row, but I accidentally stopped my combo one target early, only to find I could simply add the last one on and still complete the puzzle. More challenging ones eventually come along though. You'll need to partake in a round of Space Invaders, bullet hell minigames, and a pinball machine even inexplicably appears at one point. I particularly enjoyed the hourglass puzzles in which you need to make your way at the top of tall towers within a time limit, to which there are sometimes multiple routes. There's a sense of verticality instead of just tearing across horizontal open planes, so vertigo is on offer along with motion sickness. Completing these puzzles unlocks interconnecting grind rails which are a lot of fun to use as shortcuts to get around the locales. I often found myself stopping for a moment at the top of these structures to take in the view from the top of the world. The vistas look beautiful even on my modest computer, and the small details like moss growing on metallic platforms and Sonic's footprints in the desert dunes made me smile. Performance-wise, it's fine. I don't have the sharpest eye for these things, but I rarely felt the game drop below 60 FPS. There's undeniable pop-in, but I felt this was more noticeable when watching footage. When you're caught up in the action yourself, it's less bothersome and certainly not too intrusive or immersion breaking. The speed at which Sonic covers the draw distance probably doesn't help. There's a bit of the infamous jank, but in the open zone sections he usually feels great to control. The cathartic ability to dash off across the scenery is reminiscent of the intro to Sonic CD. At long last we can act as if we're dashing off towards the Miracle Planet, or it feels as close as realistically possible anyway. It's really liberating to scope out the horizon, set a marker and instantly blast off to your destination. Problems arise with some of the mini assault courses though. Accidentally standing on a spring or a dash panel can send you hurtling the opposite direction and can even lock you into a 2D intermission which are a pain in the arse to get out of. Sometimes this isn't even an option and you have to actually complete the challenge just to escape and get back on track. For a game about freedom of movement, you can often end up feeling trapped. The open zone islands are peppered with the aforementioned traditional cyberspace stages, kind of like a continuation of the Sonic Adventure hub world idea, as well as bringing to mind Breath of the Wild's shrines. These annoyed me though because they're largely based on levels from previous titles. It's like Sonic Team simply can't break away from tradition and are for some reason compelled to whore their past glories. How many times do we need to see Green Hill Zone remade, reimagined and rehashed? They do attempt to explain it as part of the story near the end of the game, but it feels particularly transgressive here since Frontiers is clearly meant to be a breakaway from the old, yet we're still being force-fed inferior allusions to yesteryear. There's also limited variation in their themes. For example, stages that use the layout of Sonic Adventure 2's Green Forest and Sky Rail both have Green Hill Zone visuals, making them all feel very samey. Why can't we have a Sandopolis themed level in Ares Island's overworld desert, or visit Lava Reef Zone on the volcanic Chaos Island for instance? Still, I could live with these homages if the controls and physics didn't change so that Sonic handles like a shopping trolley in them. Like in Sonic Generations, some of them are retro 2D stages while some are the more modern 3D examples, but both are a drag and feel completely unnecessary when the obstacle courses in the overworld are like far more gripping versions in which you feel like you have more agency. Sonic feels less intuitive in the 3-dimensional ones to the point I unfairly went flying off the course more than once, sometimes horizontally. The 2D ones though are absolute garbage. Sonic becomes sluggish and completely loses momentum, symbolic of the game as a whole in these moments. I've no idea how in 2022 they screwed up physics that had been perfected 30 years previously. The one saving grace of these levels is that they're mercifully short, which takes the sting out of them a bit. I tried to do as many of the multiple objectives as I could in one run, not for any sense of accomplishment, but to try to limit the amount of times I had to revisit these exercises in frustration. The amount of cutscenes that you need to skip to enter and exit these stages started to grate too. I understand there will be some sort of animated segue, but having to sit through a cutscene of Sonic unlocking the cyberspace portal, hold A to skip a cutscene of him entering it, hold A to skip a cutscene of him exiting it, and hold A to skip a cutscene informing me of how many vault keys I collected really starts to take its toll. Same goes for Sonic doing this unskippable thing every friggin' time I maxed out my rings. It's genuinely bewildering how this kind of slow, repetitive interface can still exist in modern game design. Another way you can curb the amount of times you need to visit these stupid levels is by playing the fishing minigame I mentioned earlier. I never thought I'd be happy to see Big the Cat again, but he offers us the chance to hook fish in return for prizes, including many of the game's main collectibles. There isn't much challenge to the fishing, you really just have to press A at the right moment, sometimes twice. But it's an inoffensive distraction a world away from the drudgery that angling was when first introduced back in Sonic Adventure. Filling the compendium of strikingly realistic fish is kind of fun too. And yet another way you can nab items is by performing Sonic's new Psyloop ability, which involves leaving a trail when he runs then closing this off into a circle, damaging enemies who get caught in the middle, as well as creating infinite amounts of rings among other rewards. It's a strange mechanic that feels kinda like cheating, but I can admittedly see the logic in making rings so readily available. Maxing out the number allows Sonic to run at top speed with a prolonged boost, which is hugely useful for covering large areas of ground, so it saves having to get sidetracked collecting rings just to make use of Sonic's trademark speed. It also comes in handy before a Titan battle, which are played as Super Sonic. There were seemingly no rings to collect in most of these epic face-offs, which are needed to keep Super Sonic in his super form, so it was unclear what to do other than whip up loads before the fight and pray that they lasted. Combat could be annoying during these encounters. The camera didn't reset when I was knocked away by the first enemy, facing Sonic instead of the target, so I ended up getting hit 3 times in a row before I had the chance to even correct the perspective to see what I was doing. QuickTime events feel as outdated now as they did about 5 minutes after their invention, but there's an undeniable tactile satisfaction to rounding off combos and slamming down on the enemy. There's even a skill tree which Sonic can upgrade to learn new abilities and manoeuvres to tack onto his onslaughts, but I think I had maxed it out by early in the 3rd zone, so it felt a bit underdeveloped. For the music in these battles, they opt for metalcore and rap metal. It's not for me, especially compared to the Crush 40 magic of old, but to be honest, rock music of any kind would seem a little out of place here compared to, say, a rousing orchestral piece. The final boss music though is somewhat sublime and more in keeping with the game's tone. The fight itself though really isn't what I was expecting, and not in a good way. It actually feels like they were in a rush to complete the game and had to tack it on in lieu of a proper climax. Same goes for the 2 islands preceding it. One of these literally has nothing on it except a series of vertical platforming sections, and both use the same decor as the first zone. There's the unshakable feeling that they ran out of time or ideas by the halfway point when it could have done with a bit longer in the development oven, an occurrence that's sadly all too common when it comes to AAA games. It's always dispiriting when these lack polish due to crunch or whatever, but it can be forgivable when the core concept is so satisfying. Hell, there are some people who enjoy Pokemon Scarlet and Violet if further proof were needed, and those this ain't. According to the head of Sonic Team, Takashi Iizuka, Sonic Frontiers is the new cornerstone for their mascot's future games, and that's a tune I can dance to. Yeah, it's nowhere near perfect, but for now, I'm so pleasantly surprised to have properly enjoyed a Sonic game again, and this feels like a positive step into a brave new frontier. Maybe there's hope for the blue blur yet.